what I want people to start thinking about is what are the shoulds that you have for yourself about how you're supposed to do your life, what your relationships are supposed to look like, what your daily schedule is supposed to look like, that you're not supposed to work on weekends, that you're supposed to close your laptop at 5 o'clock, that you're supposed to eat vegetables, like literally, like everything is a should.
Hey there, amazing humans, and welcome to episode number 265 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. Do you feel like your life is Groundhog Day? I know. What would it be like? Hang on to your hats and glasses. What would it be like if your life actually felt a little bit more like a vacation? Now, before you freak out and go, Sarah Walton, that is for other people. That is not possible. That is for irresponsible people who don't have responsibilities, who don't have bills. That's not real life. I hear you. I really, really do. And I want you to know I've been one of those skeptics for years. But today, with this guest, Marni Battista, I think you're going to hear something you maybe haven't heard before. Marni's job is to help people feel like they're living a little bit more of a life of vacation every day. And she does that by helping you understand what unspoken rules, what invisible laws are running your life. And she helps you examine them in a way that they can lift up and you start living life a little bit differently at a time until you start figuring out what you need to feel a lot more free. Marni and her work have appeared in the LA Times, The New Yorker, The Dr. Phil Show, On Air with Ryan Seacrest, and Home and Family TV. Her new book, Your Radical Living Challenge, 7 Questions for a Meaningful Life, is coming in February 2025 from Hay House. Marni Battista is an entrepreneur, author, informational life design specialist, podcast host, and radical truth seeker. Her honest, relatable, and down-to-earth podcast and writing drops pearls of wisdom, not only that inspire laughter and insights, but she also shares radical, life-changing stories of triumph and love. And she's on a mission to help women harness the courage to stop letting life live them and start living a life that's beyond their wildest dreams. As you listen in today, I really want you to have this be the backdrop. Marni shares this towards the end of the podcast, and I think it is so important. I wanted to put it in the intro as well. And that is that most people cannot imagine a life that's outside of just 10% different from what they have right now. And that really stuck with me. So if you've been feeling like that's all that's possible is a little tweak here, a little tweak there, oh, I'm going to be stuck in this forever, you want to pop in those earphones and listen in, because this podcast episode will have you see the real life steps you can start taking. Marni shares her own story about her life has changed just over the last 3 years in ways she couldn't even imagine, and the steps she took to get there so you can take them too. So get those earphones and let's get to it. Marni, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast, where we are talking today about making life feel like a vacation. Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah. This morning I blew up the curtains and I saw this most beautiful rainbow with the most beautiful view. And I was just like, welcome home.
I know. Oh gosh, that just felt good. I'm like, I'm going to go relax now.
No, exactly.
I think I might even have another cup of tea after that. That sounds amazing. But I'm so glad you're here to help all of us relax more, live our lives more. And I'm really excited to talk about the should word. But before we jump into all of that,
yes,
inquiring minds want to know, out of all the things Marni could be doing on planet Earth right now, why is this what you've chosen to do with your life and your business?
I was thinking about that this morning. Actually, I was meditating and I was like, the gift that I have, my why I'm here is so big. It just fills this huge space in my heart. And the journey of my life to figure that out was very messy and uncomfortable. And while I was in it and somewhat not awake, there was a feeling of like, why is this happening to me?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to now, and I just went to my 40th high school reunion.
Congrats, by the way. Holy
Thank
cannoli.
you. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's given me this really interesting perspective because I'm 58. I knew these people, some of them since like preschool, but it's old enough to really hear people's journeys of from where they were when they started to some people are already retired. And someone asked the question, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? And the
Love those.
answers were varied, but very similar. And it's that keep believing in yourself that you've got this and just keep following the sort of breadcrumbs to be who you're really meant to be. And I heard stories of people who were an investment banker until 38 and decided to be a pilot. People who wanted to be a professional athlete who became a CEO of a box company who ended up being a realtor selling to professional athletes, right?
Like, stop. That's
Yeah, right.
amazing.
And the reason that I'm sharing that is because it takes time
Mm,
sometimes to figure out what we're meant here for, but every step on the path is a little breadcrumb. And if you see it
mm.
and you lean into it and you follow it and you have faith, then you wake up and you're like, this was it. And all of those nuggets looking back were like, yes, yes,
Mm.
yes. And so I feel like I'm that ripe peach. It's the end of summer when we're recording this, and it's just not too mushy and not too hard and really
Yes.
juicy. And that's where I feel I am right now, and like my gift, and
Mm.
that I get to live it and express it. And the seeds were just there. I just didn't know it. So I just keep following it through the pain, through the
Ah,
joy.
I love that. I think you're onto something though, too. I think what you just shared is really poignant because don't we all look back when you're in it? You're like, what in the actual F is happening right now?
Yeah.
You're just like,
To-
come on, man.
yeah.
But we can take a step back, look at it, and be like, oh, I learned this that added to this, that added to this, that added to this. And now you're like, that, oh, now it all makes sense. And you really do end up pulling from all those different experiences.
Yeah. And
So
every
good.
person that I talked to started out doing one thing that led to another thing that led to another thing.
Mm.
And I think that we get so attached to this is what I worked hard to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. You go, I only have to do it for this, like, just suck it up for this much longer. But that does not feel like a vacation. That feels like a life with no
Mm.
vacation.
Mm.
And I was just really inspired by the reinventing that is possible if you follow your soul.
I love it. And I think we're lucky. I think we're living at a time because there used to be a time like you had the same job for 30 years, shut up, sit down, that's
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
And we're really living at a time where it's, I'm going to completely reinvent myself right now. It doesn't matter what age you are. And I think what ends up happening, I'm going to say it one more time because people miss it. I think what ends up happening is we recognize that all the things we learned end up contributing. And
Yeah.
I think the realtor selling to athletes, come on, you couldn't make that up. That's so good. But everything contributes to where you end up and just allowing the truth of that to settle as we look to what's next. So good.
Absolutely.
So good.
Inward.
All right. So inside of that, right, I know human beings live with a boatload of shoulds.
Yes.
And God bless this generation coming up, right? They are breaking down every should that anyone should ever feel ever, including gender, sexuality, politics, history. They're like, no, we're just not accepting the norm. Let's go. And there's still a lot of looking good going on. I think that's where a lot of shoulds come from.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pressure on all of us, no matter what societal norms we're trying to break down. And I think that's a really huge movement right now. You still have to make money and you still have to look successful and you still have to look like a good person. These things are still there. How do we deal with all these shoulds, Marni? What do we do with this and how do we start to break through them? Because they can capture us and hold us captive.
I think the first step is that you have to realize like how many shoulds you have. Because when you talk to people about questioning every assumption,
Mm-hmm.
literally everyone, they're like, oh, I didn't realize that I could question that. So
Yes.
the rules that we have about our lives and what things should look like are so baked in
Mm.
that we're not talking like, should I live abroad or should I retire at 60 or 55 or those are like very easy to identify. What I want people to start thinking about is what are the shoulds that you have for yourself
Mm.
about how you're supposed to do your life, what your relationships are supposed to look like, what your daily schedule is supposed to look like, that you're not supposed to work on weekends, that you're supposed to close your laptop at 5 o'clock, that you're supposed to eat vegetables. Like literally, like everything is a should. And with the
Mm.
internet, we have a propensity to Someone's called it yesterday useless knowledge. If you have a question, you're just going to look it up and you're going to get all these pieces of information. And I think for our generation, we still forget that we could question all of those because you will Google an answer for whatever bias you have.
It's true. It's
Right.
true. Yeah.
And so the shoulds, think about them as, okay, what are the rules of my world? And I usually have clients do this. So I think it's a great exercise is think about it this way. If you've read a great fantasy book or you watch shows like Bridgerton or movies like Marvel movies, right? I use those examples because those are the most right now most commonly watched things. But you watch an episode and you either get in with the rules of the world or you go, no, I can't get with this, and you abandon it. But once you're in, you don't question it. Yeah, fairies fly and Iron Man has a suit,
Of
whatever it
course.
is, right? There
Yes,
was the
yes.
blip. Of course there was. And so I want all of your listeners to start thinking, wow, if I was going to create treatment for my life and I was going to share it with someone who didn't know anything, I'd be like, these are the rules of my world. And those are the pieces that you can start to deconstruct what your shoulds are so that you then can begin to question, is this designed by me for me? Is this essential? Is it not? Like, we don't even
Right.
know until we start asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you said about there's so many that don't even occur to us to ask about. I talk about this when I talk about money too, because it's so similar. Like it's like a fish in water. They don't know there's water. That's just what they exist in all the time. And I
Yeah.
think beliefs are like that.
Yes. Yeah. They're so
Yeah.
unconscious.
Yeah. And I think, what do you think when people start working with you, right? And they start writing down all their shoulds, what have you seen be the most surprising to people? Or is there any kind of common theme that you've noticed over the years?
Yeah. So I'll just give you two examples. One is I started working with a client who's really smart. She's a PhD. She's an executive in a medical company. When we first started, she was like, I have to do these certain things because there is like a chopping block at my company. And if you don't comply or say yes or take on these things, you go to the top of the chopping block. And I'm a single mom. There's no dad. Like
Right. That's not an option.
that's not an
Keep
option.
going.
To 6 months later being like, yeah, I have to work, but work doesn't define me. And work is something I just do.
Ah,
And so she believed the chopping block story as deeply as she believes that I work, I do my job, now I'm dating, I'm like healthy, I'm working out, I'm meeting new friends, I'm not volunteering for every single thing at my kids' school, like letting them be more independent, like so many things, right? So that's a bigger one. And then my other favorite thing is like at the micro level about someone's schedule.
ooh.
So I was working with someone who's a coach, and I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs and people who own businesses. And she was like, oh God, like teaching these classes at 5 p.m. it's a lot, but I have to do it because my clients have corporate jobs. And so they can't meet with me during the day, really. They can't come to class. And I was like, says who? And so she was like, really? I'm like, let's do an experiment because everything in my world is an experiment. And so she shifted some things. And guess what? Nobody didn't come. Everyone made it work because they valued her class. They valued her time. And so they made it work. And we are so focused on making other people happy and what's convenient for other people at the expense of our own flow and engagement. But the thing is, she wasn't even being the best coach she could be at that time.
Right.
So it's all a house of cards. So you have to put yourself and what you think is best for you first.
Oh, isn't that the story of so many women right now? I hate to stereotype, but really,
Yeah.
it's that my feelings, my thoughts, my emotions, my needs don't matter nearly as much as yours, whoever human I'm talking to. Like it really is something to talk about, a belief or a should we were born into, right? Of like, you should put everyone before you all the time.
Especially when it comes to money, right? Because if I don't do this, like scarcity comes in, you're like, I will lose my clients. I will be broke. And same with my other client who's, I can't lose my job, like the chopping block. And so it's interesting. So I have a book coming out in February and it's 7 questions for leading a meaningful life. And one of the questions in its original form in the Old Testament was, were you honest in regards to money? And this was the first question because in this sort of writings from the olden days, it was like, if you're honest about money, because money is the thing that is the most scarce, so to speak, right? Then you're going to be honest about everything, right? Because we're so like worried about money, right? I universalized that question and made it be just, were you honest, radically honest with yourself? And I think that money and honesty with ourselves are constantly like at odds with each other. We're like having to ask ourselves, are we doing this to please? Are we doing this out of fear? Are
Yeah.
we doing this out of lack? And we just disregard like ourselves and our desires and our dreams. And so being radically honest with yourself is a really important piece of living a life that feels like you're on vacation.
Ah, so good. Okay, so before we get to how this vacation happens,
Yeah.
because I want to get there, I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Let's say there's anybody listening right now could be in this spot, right? But I know I certainly ran into this in my professional life. I think a lot of women, especially given the conversation we just had, what we were just saying about other people. And I love the radically honest about money, by the way. I'm so going to start asking the question. You're a genius. So we look at this and we're living our lives. We're looking at what we want and it's not quite matching up. And I remember a moment in my own professional life where I realized this was some BS, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
I love the TV show My Resident Alien. And as an alien, he learned that phrase. One of the first phrases you learn is, this is some bullshit. And it makes me laugh so hard, right? I just love it. So I like to say that this is some BS, but like looking around going, what? So if we have someone listening right now who just realized she's so super stuck, what do you do? Like, what do you do? How do you start pulling apart this life of shoulds? How do you start creating a life that feels more like a vacation?
Yeah. So I have this little, of course, because all coaches do, right? Like a framework. And so it's the dream framework. And so the D is like discover and then start to dismantle. So step one, when I said build the rules of your world, that's like the
Yeah.
discover. So the dismantle, the first thing, and this is very simple but deep, I think, which is, where did you learn this? Who told you this? And how far back does it go? And I just had a client actually do this little exercise. So this might be helpful for some of your listeners. Is I had her like do a little imagining of sitting down with her 12-year-old self. And I had her find a beautiful, like little location, sitting across from a 12-year-old parent. And she picked her mom and asking, like, what was it like for you growing up? Where did you learn? So, one of the things that her mom used to say to her, and maybe some of your listeners will relate to this, was, oh, we don't need that. Like when other people had stuff, right? And so then she felt guilty about everything, right? Everything she bought, every trip she took, everything she invested in. She was
We didn't really
always
need
like
it.
feeling, yeah, guilty,
Okay.
right? Like just guilt, right?
Mhm.
You should live this certain life. It should look this way. And she did this exercise and she was just journaling. And it's so obvious, but she had never noticed it. Her mom grew up in the Depression. And right. And so she was told by her parents, you know what? We don't need that, to help her daughter, the mom, feel better about not having very much.
Yeah, it was a protection.
It was a protection. And then,
Yeah.
of course, her mom told, because her mom also was very middle class and had a lot of children. And so she would say, oh, we don't need that. And so when she went down like a couple of these shoulds and started doing this little exercise, really from this, imagine your 12-year-old parent, like, where did you learn it? What is your mom saying to you? Why do you think that is? How does that feel? She was like, oh my God, my poor mother. And
Right.
it like it was lifted, right? It was dismantled. So she's, wait, I can rewrite that for myself, for my children, of course, she has daughters, for my daughters, right? And
Yeah.
so that's a really great exercise to start dismantling some of these shoulds and coming to them. You can choose to keep them, by the way,
Of
because
course.
not all shoulds are bad. And that's the point, is consciously choosing them so that you are designing a life and a world that is aligned with who you really are at the core.
Oh, so good. And I think too, what I love about that exercise too, Marnie, is the compassion it can bring.
Yes.
Because shoulding, right? The life of a should is so mean and it's so rough and it's so judgmental, right? It's, how come you don't know how to do, you know what I mean? It has that energy to it. And so I think to bring it back to, hey, we were all 12 once. Somebody taught us something, right? And we're just acting out of that because we didn't examine it.
Totally. And I had clients do this. This is another fun exercise people can do, but it's called like a time sculpture. But I had them make a list, like on the left side of a piece of paper, of every sort of trauma, mini trauma that happened to them in their life.
Oh my
And
gosh.
most of them happened between 0 and 14.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where your shoulds are like planted. And then on the right side, I had them make a list of some of their dreams, right? That vacation life,
Mhm.
right? Like the life of your deepest desires. And it was like very clear, like that was 0 to 14. I have this leftover part of my life. Am I going to live it based on that? Or am I going to dismantle those and start with the blank slate so I can create? And it's a really empowering sort of experience to map that out and see where those things were formed and see how, at an intellectual level, how ridiculous it is that we're still living our life based on those beliefs that were created then.
Yeah, it's true. You're having me, my brain, as you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember this one thing. Yeah, there's so many things, gosh, that we just leave unexamined, right? The unexamined life, as it were. But okay, so let's go back to our person who just realized they're stuck, and this is some BS. Thank you, resident alien. Right?
Yeah.
We've got the dream and dismantle, and
Yeah.
then where do we go from there? So we start recognizing this. What happens? What should we do?
So this is where it starts to get fun. I think. So most like coaching is really about discovering your blocks and releasing them and all of these kinds of things. So the next thing that is really fun is that this dream framework, right? This like designing life on your terms is actually based on a lot of things, but one of them is the design thinking model that was created at Stanford University for product development. And it's universal. In fact, when I talk to anyone who has like an MBA or is a product consultant or product manager, they're like, oh, the design thinking model.
That's so
And
cool.
it's
Okay.
so cool. Okay. So the first phase in that is what they call the empathy phase. And so if you're a consultant or designer, if you're going to figure out, like someone was just saying, oh yeah, I'm working on improving the mobile app for Marriott check-in process. Okay. They're
Okay.
using this process. She's a consultant. So the empathy phase is you go out and you find out, you have to have the empathy and understand the user of this product. What are
Yes.
they looking for? Focus groups, feedback. Who are you really? What do you need? All of those things, more than just demographics. Okay. So in the design thinking model, as it applies to your life, the first stage then is if I get rid of all the shoulds and I'm a blank slate, then who am I designing my life for today? And so the
Ooh.
empathy phase is discovering what I call your soul map, which is getting into yourself at the soul level about what it is you love, what it is you love to do. What is your what? Like
Mm.
you uniquely. How do you like to carry it out best? Like
Ah.
groups, one on one, in nature, collaborative, where you feel seen, where you get to be a leader, where you get to learn in small times in the morning, at the nighttime, like literally the minutia. And then your why. What are the core motivations that really light you up where you feel like it's effortless? This is so
Mm.
you that you don't even understand it's your gift
You
because
just do
you
it.
just do it
Yeah. Oh,
because this is your motivation. And so when you get your soul map complete, right, you're like, and then there's other pieces of it, of course, but you're like, oh, then all I want to do is start trying one small step at a time to make adjustments in my life to start designing a life that is in harmony, that is resident, that is aligned with my unique soul map. And because there's
mm.
only one of you, you can understand that shoulds from the outside may or may not apply because you are living your life designed for you, not by
Oh.
everyone else.
I just watched my own shoulders drop. That was like, oh, that felt good. Because you were like, now it gets fun. I'm like, tell me. And then it was like, oh yeah, that got fun. Like and the idea that most of the shoulds do come from the outside world, right? It's that those are two of my favorite questions too, Marty. Where did you learn that? Who taught you that? And asking those questions I think it helps with this part too, because you recognize how much came from the outside, right? It wasn't you. You didn't decide that actively. It was just put there and you picked it up.
Yeah. And most
So
people,
good.
when you ask them, what do you want in their life? They're like, more freedom,
Everybody.
time,
Yes.
money, right? Freedom. And so you can't become free until you dismantle the shoulds. And so here's a deep thing. Everyone
Love.
write this down. Freedom is not needing to be free from anything.
Right.
So when you're
Right.
living your soul map life, and that's why I say design a life you don't need to retire from, right? Find work that you love so much you don't need to be free from it, because it's just you doing your thing. And it doesn't even have to be paid work. It's just you living your gift. That's freedom. And so
Really is. Yeah,
yeah.
it really is. I think, God, what a bill of goods we all got sold, right? Like you have to work, you have to grow up and do this thing and then get a job. And again, something else I'm grateful to this generation for breaking down, but I think it's still, I think we can get stuck still. Yeah, but is that just for other people? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
if I really live my gift, am I going to be homeless? Like, really? Like, how does this work? Do you run up against that with your clients as
I
well?
do. And it's really
Yeah.
funny. So I was at this reunion. I was talking to the guy who's now a realtor selling like $13 million homes to professional athletes. And he was
Amazing.
like, do you ever have that fear fantasy, or what if I'm broke and homeless? And I was like, of course, who
Who
doesn't?
doesn't? Yeah.
And he was like, and I said, so what's yours? And he's like, he has a good friend who lives in our hometown. I already asked Rod. He said I can come move into his guest house. I'll
We got a
help
backup
him.
plan.
Like, yeah, exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm moving into my cousin's guest house too. Like we all
Right.
have. I share that because everyone has the broken homeless story.
Yeah.
And when you look back at what you have done and what you have accomplished, and when I do this work with people, we always come up with a safety net,
Good.
right? Because you have to have one.
We need it. Our
You
brains need it
do,
or it goes nuts, right?
but
Yeah.
you in real life, you do need it. You have to
Yeah.
pay your bills. And so the safety net exercise is a really important piece of like actually allowing your emotional self to have psychological safety so that you can
Yeah.
start to intuit and bring information in. And so that safety net plan, almost all of my clients are like talking to financial advisors, looking at their money, really looking at the numbers. A lot. I am shocked how many women that I talk to in their 50s and 60s, maybe they have a financial advisor, maybe they're married and they have a partner and they have that, but they don't actually really know the
Right.
numbers and they don't know what it looks like.
Yes.
And they're not sitting down and having that conversation. They don't have a plan. And so that psychological safety with a trusted advisor, if this is where you are in your life, is a really important piece, because we don't just be like, I'm selling everything and going to Bali. There's no Thelma and Louise moment in this. We want to like live life on your terms without blowing up the life that you have.
Oh, I love that last part because I do think that's what keeps people from truly exploring this as an option. That like,
Yeah.
can life really be that good? And it's nah. One, it's for other people, like we said. And two, it's just something people say on the internet. Like those are people who are irresponsible and don't have obligations. I think, and you can hear it. You can feel it when you see it. It's that sort of skepticism that just comes in and takes over. And I think what you're sharing is really important is no, we're not talking about magical thinking.
And no
Right?
toxic positivity. My
Right.
client that was on the corporate shopping block, but who actually wasn't, when she did this financial plan, she came back and she's, wait, my kids are like 13 and 15. Like I still want to and need to work. Right. But once she became empowered and realized that her current position was not aligned with her soul map, and she started talking to the people above her and around her team about what it would need, what she would need to feel fulfilled in her current position. And just the act of starting to create her CV and update it, her supervisor was like, you're not thinking of leaving, are you? And she was like, I'm not. She was like, okay. And then that's when everything changed. So again, we weren't going to blow up her
Amazing.
life. It was like,
Right.
you know what? Maybe this position, and we have to, people get so overwhelmed and burned out and frustrated. They don't want to deal with
Yes.
the other options. So
Mhm.
having the space and time to do that is really
Yeah.
important. You may or may not end up using that, but just the act of realizing she's empowered, she has options, exactly why this position is no longer working for her based on her soul map. everything opened up. So I really want to emphasize this. It's not magical thinking. This is not become an influencer. This isn't sell shit on Amazon and make millions. This is literally your real grown up life. How do we start to adjust this over time? It is a process.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. And I want to make sure we do this, Marni, because I think I always love to respect other coaches, like methodologies and your frameworks and stuff. Go through the dream with me so that we make sure everybody's got it.
Okay, great. We talked about the D is discover and dismantle.
Right.
The R is release and recover, which is recover your true self.
Love.
Right.
Love.
The E is embrace. So that's that empathy phase. Like we start to embrace who we are, right? And then the A is we have to start to get into action. And action is ideation. We create life plans, 3 possible life plans. We mix and match. We get into experiment. We do these experiments, which are scaled down versions of our ideas. And then the M is the maintenance. And that is really becoming a creator. And being a creator in your life is not a creator of content. It is a creator where no matter what age you are in and what phase, you always feel like you're creating. You are never in an autopilot, set it and forget it life of stagnation. Creation is what makes us feel alive and enlivened. It's our vitality, it's our youthfulness. And so when you're in the maintenance, how do you maintain this designed living lifestyle? You're constantly revisiting these things and growing and learning and adjusting after your assessments. And life is literally so fun when you're in a creator mode.
Isn't it the best?
The best.
I love it. I love to share. Thank you so much for that, by the way. I love the dream framework. This is good. I love to share with that last piece that you just said. I always joke around how humans are the only species on planet Earth that can imagine something different from what is. Right? There's never a vacation poster for elephants because they don't imagine that, right? They don't imagine a day that's different than today. This is just life. And we have this unique ability to imagine outside of what we see. The only creatures on earth that can do that and then create it. And I think it's one of the things that makes us, like you said, feel the most alive, but also I think in the most harmony. Don't you just love other people when you're in a creation mode? Like you have so much generosity and joy to give when you're actually participating in a creation cycle. It's like the best.
It's so fun. And here's what's crazy is that when you go through this framework, see, most people imagine just a 10% variation of their current life.
Ooh, say that again for the people in the back.
Most people just imagine or dream a 10% variation of their current life. And when I do this work with people, what they end up like creating is sometimes not one idea that was in front of them. It's truly something that comes from that soul map level, right? And it's amazing. People are like, what I really want to do one day is move to Woodstock. And I'm like, wait, why is that not on your plan? I don't know. It's only like I thought I'm like, let's get it. Let's do an experiment. So it could be something that you haven't even dreamed up yet. So I'm living a life that I could have never imagined in 2021. Like,
what is so different for you? I would love to hear from you specifically. What do you feel so different?
I lived in Los Angeles, right? My kids were empty nesting. I just recovered from this big traumatic ski accident. And my husband was like, let's get out of here. And I was like, no, I live here. My friends are here, blah, blah, blah. And so we started working. We're like, oh, because this is what people do in LA. You get a house, a second home in like the desert.
Yes. Very common.
Right. Or in Arrowhead, right. Or in Mammoth, right. Or whatever it is. And I was like, and we even did this like ideal situation. And it was like, oh, there's sun and water. And we did this whole thing. And when I look back at those scribbles from that beginning of those conversations, it was literally just based on what I knew and what I thought I knew. And I did do a lot of experiments in the desert and it was great. But what I ended up doing was selling my house, selling most of my stuff, putting stuff in storage, living in an RV for a year, traveling around the country, trying to figure out what really blew my hair back.
Oh my gosh.
To living in a ski mountain town in Colorado. And I thought at that point I would never even ski again, right? Where every day literally does feel like a vacation, right? But I never could have thought of that. It was not even anywhere in my consciousness. The process unfolded the ideas. And that's what's really cool is that the experiments and the data that you get as you go through this design process, you prototype. That's what they do. They empathy stage, they do prototyping, they test, they go back, right? And so prototyping, experimenting is a really important part that helps you unfold and uncover those things that are beyond the 10% you can imagine today.
Oh, so good. So I feel like we coaches are always telling people the magic is in the action. It's
Yeah.
like you just don't know
I
until you
love
get
that.
acting.
I've never heard a phrase like that, but that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, right? Because you don't know until you start doing it. And that's what I always like. It just breaks my heart when people spend months and months studying, right? Let me look up the best camera to use. Let me look at, and it's, dude, just do it. Just get started. That's the only way you're going to know.
Literally researching 20 best places to retire. I was researching. I had a spreadsheet.
Oh, it's hilarious. And then in the end of the day, who knew, right? Until you were actually feet on the ground going for it, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, Marni, that's so good. I'm glad I asked you to share that story because it really is such a great example of what's possible when you trust the process. You have to actually get in action and start figuring stuff out. And that's the only way you're going to know.
Yeah.
Right?
I ended up blowing up my business, firing everyone, redesigning my business to meet my lifestyle, like everything. And yeah, I think that we believe that we only are creating when we're in our 20s or 30s. And that's just a lie.
Goods, lies.
Bullshit.
Marni, thank you so much for this conversation. This has just been absolutely wonderful. And for all the girlfriends listening who are like, what just happened to my life? This is amazing. I understand you have a free gift for everybody listening today. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So I have this quiz. It's decodeyourdestinyquiz.com, and it will actually reveal what sort of like prototype you are for actually starting the dream process. And it will give you actually the steps that you need to take, not only practical, but at an emotional level and where you need to go. So it's really fun. You'll get instant results and some action steps to take.
Love it. Love it. All right, you guys, we are going to have that link underneath the video if you're watching on YouTube, or it'll be in the show notes if you're listening in. And Marni, if someone is, I need me some more Marni in my life, where can people find you? Where do you hang out online?
MarniBattista.com.
All right. That's a woman after my own heart. Nice and simple. I love it. I love it. Marni, thank you again for sharing your story and your wisdom with us. I know we helped a lot of people today who are just on that cusp of believing this is really possible, and it really is. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for the conversation. It was so fun.